Many speeches are made, men of Athens, at almost every meeting of the assembly, with reference to the aggressions which Philip has been committing ever since he concluded the peace, not only against yourselves, but against all other peoples. And I am sure that all would agree, however little they may act on their belief, that our aim, both in speech and in action, should be to cause him to cease from his insolence and to pay the penalty for it. And yet I see that in fact, the treacherous sacrifice of our interests has gone on, until what seems an ill-omened saying may, I fear, be really true, that if all who came forward desire to propose, and you desire to carry, the measures which would make your position as pitiful as it could possibly be, it could not, so I believe, be made worse than it is now. It may be that there are many reasons for this, and that our affairs did not reach their present condition from any one or two causes. But if you examine the matter aright, you will find that the chief responsibility rests with those whose aim is to win your favor, not to propose what is best. Some of them, men of Athens, so long as they can maintain the conditions which bring them reputation and influence, take no thought for the future, and therefore think that you also should take none, while others, by accusing and slandering those who are actively at work, are simply trying to make the city spend its energies in punishing the members of its own body, and so leave Philip free to say and do what he likes. Such political methods as these, familiar to you as they are the real causes of the evil. And I beg you, men of Athens, if I tell you certain truths outspokenly, to let no resentment on your part fall upon me on this account. Consider the matter in this light. In every other sphere of life, you believe that the right of free speech ought to be so universally shared by all who are in the city, that you have extended it both to foreigners and to slaves, and one may see many a servant in Athens speaking his mind with greater liberty than is granted to citizens in some other states. But from the sphere of political counsel, you have utterly banished this liberty. The result is that in your meetings you give yourselves airs and enjoy their flattery, listening to nothing but what is meant to please you, while in the world of facts and events you are in the last extremity of peril. If then you are still in this mood today, I do not know what I can say, but if you are willing to listen while I tell you without flattery what your interest requires, I am prepared to speak. For though our position is very bad indeed, and much has been sacrificed, it is still possible, even now, if you will do your duty, to set all right once more. It is a strange thing, perhaps, that I am about to say, but it is true. The worst feature in the past is that in which lies our best hope for the future. And what is this? It is that you are in your present plight because you do not do any part of your duty, small or great. For of course, if you were doing all that you should do, and were still in this evil case, you could not even hope for any improvement. As it is, Philip has conquered your indolence and your indifference, but he has not conquered Athens. You have not been vanquished, you have never even stirred. Now if it was admitted by us all that Philip was at war with Athens and was transgressing the peace, a speaker would have to do nothing but to advise you as to the safest and easiest method of resistance to him. But since there are some who are in so extraordinary a frame of mind that, though he is capturing cities, though many of your possessions are in his hands, and though he is committing aggressions against all men, they still tolerate certain speakers who constantly assert at your meetings that it is some of us, who are provoking the war. It is necessary to be on our guard and come to a right understanding on the matter. For there is a danger lest anyone who proposes or advises resistance should find himself accused of having brought about the war. Well, I say this first of all, and lay it down as a principle, that if it is open to us to deliberate whether we should remain at peace or should go to war. Now, if it is possible for the city to remain at peace, if the decision rests with us that I may make this my starting point, then I say that we ought to do so, and I call upon anyone who says that it is so to move his motion, and to act, and not to defraud us. But if another with weapons in his hands and a large force about him holds out to you the name of peace while his own acts are acts of war, what course remains open to us but that of resistance? Though if you wish to profess peace in the same manner as he, I have no quarrel with you. But if any man's conception of peace is that it is a state in which Philip can master all that intervenes till at last he comes to attack ourselves, such a conception, in the first place, is madness, and in the second place, this peace that he speaks of is a peace which you are to observe towards Philip, while he does not observe it towards you. And this it is, this power to carry on war against you without being met by any hostilities on your part, that Philip is purchasing with all the money that he is spending. Indeed, if we intend to wait till the time comes when he admits that he is at war with us, we are surely the most innocent persons in the world. Why, even if he comes to Attica itself, to the very Piraeus, he will never make such an admission, if we are to judge by his dealings with others. For to take one instance, he told the Olynthians, when he was 5 miles from the city, that there were only 2 alternatives. Either they must cease to live in Olynthus, or he to live in Macedonia. But during the whole time before that, whenever anyone accused him of any such sentiments, he was indignant and sent envoys to answer the charge. Again, he marched into the Phocians' country, as though visiting his allies. It was by Phocian envoys that he was escorted on the march, and most people in Athens contended strongly that his crossing the pass would bring no good to Thebes. Worse still, he has lately seized Pherae and still holds it, though he went to Thessaly as a friend and an ally. And latest of all, he told those unhappy citizens of Aureus that he had sent his soldiers to visit them and to make kind inquiries. He had heard that they were sick and suffering from faction, and it was right for an ally and a true friend to be present at such a time. Now if, instead of giving them warning and using open force, he deliberately chose to deceive these men, who could have done him no harm, though they might have taken precautions against suffering any themselves, do you imagine that he will make a formal declaration of war upon you before he commences hostilities, and that, so long as you are content to be deceived? Impossible. For so long as you, though you are the injured party, make no complaint against him, but accuse some of your own body, he would be the most fatuous man on earth if he were to interrupt your strife and contentions with one another to bid you turn upon himself, and so to cut away the ground from the arguments by which his hirelings put you off when they tell you that he is not at war with Athens. In God's name, is there a man in his senses who would judge by words, and not by facts, whether another was at peace or at war with him? Of course there is not. Why, from the very first, when the peace had only just been made, before those who are now in the Chersonese had been sent out, Philip was taking Surium and Doriscus, and expelling the soldiers who were in the castle of Surium and the sacred mountain, where they had been placed by your general. But what was he doing in acting thus? For he had sworn to a peace. And let no one ask, what do these things amount to? What do they matter to Athens? For whether these acts were trifles which could have no interest for you is another matter, but the principles of religion and justice, whether a man transgress them in small things or great, have always the same force. What? When he is sending mercenaries into the Chersonese, which the king and all the Hellenes have acknowledged to be yours, when he openly avows that he is going to the rescue and states it in his letter, what is it that he is doing? He tells you indeed that he is not making war upon you. But so far am I from admitting that one who acts in this manner is observing the peace which he made with you, that I hold that in grasping at Megara, in setting up tyrants in Euboea, in advancing against Thrace at the present moment, in pursuing his machinations in the Peloponnese, and in carrying out his entire policy with the help of his army, he is violating the peace and is making war against you. Unless you mean to say that even to bring up engines to besiege you is no breach of the peace until they are actually planted against your walls. But you will not say this, for the man who is taking the steps and contriving the means which will lead to my capture is at war with me, even though he has not yet thrown a missile or shot an arrow. Now what are the things which would imperil your safety if anything should happen? The alienation of the Hellespont, the placing of Megara and Euboea in the power of the enemy, and the attraction of Peloponnesian sympathy to his cause. Can I then say that one who is erecting such engines of war as these against the city is at peace with you? Far from it. For from the very day when he annihilated the Phocians, from that very day I say, I date the beginning of his hostilities against you, and for your part I think that you will be wise if you resist him at once, but that if you let him be, you will find that, when you wish to resist, resistance itself is impossible. Indeed, so widely do I differ, men of Athens, from all your other advisers, that I do not think there is any room for discussion today in regard to the Chersonese or Byzantium. We must go to their defense and take every care that they do not suffer, and we must send all that they need to the soldiers who are at present there. But we have to take counsel for the good of all the Hellenes, in view of the grave peril in which they stand. And I wish to tell you on what grounds I am so alarmed at the situation, in order that if my reasoning is correct, you may share my conclusions, and exercise some forethought for yourselves at least, if you are actually unwilling to do so for the Hellenes as a whole, but that if you think that I am talking nonsense and am out of my senses, you may both now and hereafter decline to attend to me as though I were a sane man. The rise of Philip to greatness from such small and humble beginnings, the mistrustful and quarrelsome attitude of the Hellenes towards one another, the fact that his growth out of what he was into what he is was a far more extraordinary thing than would be his subjugation of all that remains, when he has already secured so much. All this and all similar themes upon which I might speak at length, I will pass over. But I see that all men, beginning with yourselves, have conceded to him the very thing which has been at issue in every Hellenic war during the whole of the past. And what is this? It is the right to act as he pleases, to mutilate and to strip the Hellenic peoples one by one, to attack and to enslave their cities. For 73 years you were the leading people of Hellas, and the Spartans for 30 years save one. And in these last times, after the Battle of Leuctra, the Thebans too acquired some power. Yet neither to you, nor to Thebes, nor to Sparta, was such a right ever conceded by the Hellenes as the right to do whatever you pleased. Far from it. First of all, it was your own behavior, or rather that of the Athenians of that day, which some thought immoderate. And all, even those who had no grievance against Athens, felt bound to join the injured parties, and to make war upon you. Then, in their turn, the Spartans, when they had acquired an empire and succeeded to a supremacy like your own, attempted to go beyond all bounds and to disturb the established order to an unjustifiable extent. And once more, all, even those who had no grievance against them, had recourse to war. Why mention the others? For we ourselves and the Spartans, though we could originally allege no injury done by the one people to the other, nevertheless felt bound to go to war on account of the wrongs which we saw the rest suffering. And yet, all the offences of the Spartans in those 30 years of power, and of your ancestors in their 70 years, were less, men of Athens, than the wrongs inflicted upon the Greeks by Philip in the 13 years not yet completed, during which he has been to the fore, less do I say. Less. They are not a fraction of them. A few words will easily prove this. I say nothing of Olynthus, and Methone, and Apollonia, and 32 cities in the Thracian region, all annihilated by him with such savagery, that a visitor to the spot would find it difficult to tell that they had ever been inhabited. I remain silent in regard to the extirpation of the great Phocian race, but what is the condition of Thessaly? Has he not robbed their very cities of their governments and set up tetrarchies that they may be enslaved, not merely by whole cities, but by whole tribes at a time? Are not the cities of Euboea even now ruled by tyrants, and that in an island that is neighbour to Thebes and Athens? Does he not write expressly in his letters, "I am at peace with those who choose to obey me"? And what he thus writes he does not fail to act upon, for he is gone to invade the Hellespont. He previously went to attack Ambracia. The great city of Elis in the Peloponnese is his. He has recently intrigued against Megara, and neither Hellas nor the world beyond it is large enough to contain the man's ambition. But though all of us, the Hellenes, see and hear these things, we send no representatives to one another to discuss the matter. We show no indignation. We are in so evil a mood, so deep have the lines been dug which sever city from city, that up to this very day we are unable to act as either our interest or our duty require. We cannot unite. We can form no combination for mutual support or friendship, but we look on while the man grows greater, because everyone has made up his mind, as it seems to me, to profit by the time during which his neighbour is being ruined, and no one cares or acts for the safety of the Hellenes. For we all know that Philip is like the recurrence or the attack of a fever or other illness in his descent upon those who fancy themselves for the present well out of his reach. And further, you must surely realize that all the wrongs that the Hellenes suffered from the Spartans or ourselves, they at least suffered at the hands of true-born sons of Hellas. And one might conceive it was as though a lawful son, born to a great estate, managed his affairs in some wrong or improper way. His conduct would in itself deserve blame and denunciation, but at least it could not be said that he was not one of the family, or was not the heir to the property. But had it been a slave or a supposititious son that was thus ruining and spoiling an inheritance to which he had no title, why, good heavens, how infinitely more scandalous and reprehensible all would have declared it to be. And yet they show no such feeling in regard to Philip, although not only is he no Hellene, not only has he no kinship with Hellenes, but he is not even a barbarian from a country that one could acknowledge with credit. He is a pestilent Macedonian, from whose country it used not to be possible to buy even a slave of any value. And in spite of this, is there any degree of insolence to which he does not proceed? Not content with annihilating cities, does he not manage the Pythian Games, the common meeting of the Hellenes, and send his slaves to preside over the competition in his absence? Is he not master of Thermopylae, and of the passes which lead into Hellenic territory? Does he not hold that district with garrisons and mercenaries? Has he not taken the precedence in consulting the oracle, and thrust aside ourselves and the Thessalians and Dorians and the rest of the Amphictyons, though the right is not one which is given even to all of the Hellenes? Does he not write to the Thessalians to prescribe the constitution under which they are to live? Does he not send one body of mercenaries to Porthmus to expel the popular party of Eretria, and another to Aureus to set up Philistides as tyrant? And yet the Hellenes see these things and endure them, gazing, it seems to me, as they would gaze at a hailstorm, each people praying that it may not come their way, but no one trying to prevent it. Nor is it only his outrages upon Hellas that go unresisted. No one resists even the aggressions which are committed against himself. Ambracia and Lucas belong to the Corinthians. He has attacked them. Now Pactus to the Achaeans. He has sworn to hand it over to the Aetolians, Echinus to the Thebans. He has taken it from them, and is now marching against their allies the Byzantines. Is it not so? And of our own possessions, to pass by all the rest, is not Cardia, the greatest city in the Chersonese, in his hands? Thus are we treated. And we are all hesitating and torpid, with our eyes upon our neighbours, distrusting one another rather than the man whose victims we all are. But if he treats us collectively in this outrageous fashion, what do you think he will do when he has become master of each of us separately? What then is the cause of these things? For as it was not without reason and just cause that the Hellenes in old days were so prompt for freedom, so it is not without reason or cause that they are now so prompt to be slaves. There was a spirit, men of Athens, a spirit in the minds of the people in those days, which is absent today, the spirit which vanquished the wealth of Persia, which led Hellas in the path of freedom, and never gave way in face of battle by sea or by land. A spirit whose extinction today has brought universal ruin and turned Hellas upside down. What was this spirit? It was nothing subtle nor clever. It meant that men who took money from those who aimed at dominion or at the ruin of Hellas were execrated by all. That it was then a very grave thing to be convicted of bribery, that the punishment for the guilty man was the heaviest that could be inflicted, that for him there could be no plea for mercy nor hope of pardon. No orator, no general, would then sell the critical opportunity whenever it arose, the opportunity so often offered to men by fortune, even when they are careless and their foes are on their guard. They did not barter away the harmony between people and people, nor their own mistrust of the tyrant and the foreigner, nor any of these high sentiments. Where are such sentiments now? They have been sold in the market and are gone, and those have been imported in their stead, through which the nation lies ruined and plague-stricken, the envy of the man who has received his hire, the amusement which accompanies his avowal, the pardon granted to those whose guilt is proved, the hatred of one who censures the crime, and all the appurtenances of corruption. For as to ships, numerical strength, unstinting abundance of funds, and all other material of war, and all the things by which the strength of cities is estimated, every people can command these in greater plenty, and on a larger scale by far than in old days. But all these resources are rendered unserviceable, ineffectual, unprofitable by those who traffic in them. That these things are so today, you doubtless see, and need no testimony of mine, and that in times gone by the opposite was true, I will prove to you, not by any words of my own, but by the record inscribed by your ancestors on a pillar of bronze, and placed on the Acropolis, not to be a lesson to themselves. They needed no such record to put them in a right mind, but to be a reminder and an example to you of the zeal that you ought to display in such a cause. What then is the record? Arthmius, son of Paethanax of Zelaya, is an outlaw, and is the enemy of the Athenian people and their allies, he and his house. Then follows the reason for which this step was taken, because he brought the gold from the Medes into the Peloponnese. Such is the record. Consider, in heaven's name, what must have been the mind of the Athenians of that day, when they did this, and their conception of their position. They set up a record that because a man of Zelaya, Arthemius by name, a slave of the king of Persia, for Zelaya is in Asia, as part of his service to the king, had brought gold, not to Athens, but to the Peloponnese, he should be an enemy of Athens and her allies, he and his house, and that they should be outlaws. And this outlawry is no such disfranchisement as we ordinarily mean by the word. For what would it matter to a man of Zelaya that he might have no share in the public life of Athens? But there is a clause in the law of murder dealing with those in connection with whose death the law does not allow a prosecution for murder, but the slaying of them is to be a holy act, and let him die an outlaw, it runs. The meaning, accordingly, is this, that the slayer of such a man is to be pure from all guilt. They thought, therefore, that the safety of all the Hellenes was a matter which concerned themselves. Apart from this belief, it could not have mattered to them whether anyone bought or corrupted men in the Peloponnese, and whenever they detected such offenders, they carried their punishment and their vengeance so far as to pillory their names forever. As the natural consequence, the Hellenes were a terror to the foreigner, not the foreigner to the Hellenes. It is not so now. Such is not your attitude in these or in other matters. But what is it? You know it yourselves, for why should I accuse you explicitly on every point? And that of the rest of the Hellenes is like your own, and no better. And so I say that the present situation demands our utmost earnestness and good counsel. And what counsel? Do you bid me tell you, and will you not be angry if I do so? He reads from the document. Now there is an ingenious argument which is used by those who would reassure the city, to the effect that, after all, Philip is not yet in the position once held by the Spartans, who ruled everywhere over sea and land, with the king for their ally, and nothing to withstand them. And that nonetheless Athens defended herself even against them, and was not swept away. Since that time the progress in every direction, one may say, has been great, and has made the world today very different from what it was then. But I believe that in no respect has there been greater progress or development than in the art of war. In the first place, I am told that in those days the Spartans and all our other enemies would invade us for 4 or 5 months during, that is, the actual summer, and would damage Attica with infantry and citizen troops, and then return home again. And so old-fashioned were the men of that day, nay rather such true citizens, that no one ever purchased any object from another for money, but their warfare was of a legitimate and open kind. But now, as I am sure you see, most of our losses are the result of treachery, and no issue is decided by open conflict or battle, while you are told that it is not because he leads a column of heavy infantry that Philip can march wherever he chooses, but because he has attached to himself a force of light infantry, cavalry, archers, mercenaries, and similar troops.